Our speaker this evening is Kathy Easton Caminiti, the daughter of Buck and Dot Easton. Kathy grew up on Pice Pike, which of course was later renamed Turfway Road, in Florence on their dairy farm. She graduated from Boone County High School, and when the farm was condemned by the airport in 1979, the family moved to a farm in Grant County. In 1991, Kathy and her husband Joe bought a home on Middle Creek Road and moved back to Boone County. She has worked at 2 different companies performing computer work, customer service, sales, and marketing. Her last employer, Trailmobiles Distribution Center, where she had worked for 20 years, unfortunately closed this past year. One of her and Joe's hobbies is birding. They have traveled extensively in the United States and Canada and have accumulated a total bird life list of 565 bird species observed. They have also observed all 19 species of owls that occur in the United States. Their particular interest in birds of prey have led them to becoming federal and state licensed raptor rehabilitators for the past 26 years. In addition to many injured hawks and owls, they have rehabbed 2 bald eagles. She is the former president of the Kentucky Ornithological Society and has led field trips for the Northern Kentucky Bird Club, including an annual owl prowl. Kathy's other hobbies are local history and genealogy research. She has a website at www.eastonhistory.com, and some of her research projects, she enjoys transcribing old 1800s documents, researching families, and being involved in local family cemetery preservation. This isn't in her bio here, but I will also mention that she was the moving force behind the restoration of the Vaughn Cemetery this past year. If you remember, Larkin Vaughn was the one civilian casualty in the skirmish at Florence during the Civil War, and Kathy was instrumental in getting it all back together and getting it in good shape. If you would like directions to that cemetery, you can see her after the program. Tonight, she will share some old photographs and family history of her grandparents, Ambros and Linnie Easton. They owned Easterdale Stock Farm on Price Pike from 1919 until 1944. We're very lucky and happy to have Kathy with us this evening. Kathy?
Thank you, Michael, and thanks to all of you for having me. I do love genealogy in addition to birds. Lots of hobbies, but I like learning new things, local history and everything. So I guess I never knew any of my grandparents. Maybe that's what started it. I told my son probably 1,000 times how fortunate he is to have known all his grandparents because I didn't know any of mine. So this is my dad's mom and dad, Ambros and Linnie Easton. This is actually a cropped picture off of a winner's circle photograph, which is laying over there. And as far as genealogy, the furthest back I've gotten on the Easton side, there's Ambros, the first one there, and then his father, John Thomas Easton III, John Thomas Easton II, and John Easton I. So I call them John 1, 2, and 3. There's many of John Easton II's descendants that we could never find, his father, what happened to him, because they appear on the next census and the father's gone. I went to Dearborn County courthouse in the basement, if you've done any basement. Is that very loud? And found in a circuit court complete record book that he was actually murdered on Christmas Day, 1840. So it was grand jury, state of Indiana versus Joseph Peters, indictment manslaughter of John Easton. On Christmas Day, 1840, Joseph Peters feloniously and willfully did make assault, and with the chair in both hands did feloniously and willfully strike upon the head of John Easton one mortal wound of the length of 3 inches and the breadth of 1 inch, of which said mortal wound John Easton then and there instantly died. Joseph Peters feloniously and willfully did kill and slay, contrary to the form of the statute in such case, and this was the prosecuting attorney's record, and this is supposed to be the complete record book. There's no mention of the defense at all. It goes straight to Monday, May 12, 1841. The following verdict, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty as charged in this indictment. Well, why? There was no reason as to why. So this is going to demand another, hopefully there's more details than what was reported in that record book. But after he was murdered, his son, well, his wife and son, and two other members, siblings, moved to Boone County, Kentucky, where two of the brothers already were down there working. I think it was mining. And this is a picture of him. This is John II, born 1822. This obituary was found in the Aurora Library. And, you know, what a treasure. Somebody just wrote this beautiful obituary. You know, born September 26, 1822, there in Dearborn County. He was united in matrimony to Lucinda Sanders in 1845, which is my ancestor, had 8 children, and she passed away right after the 8th child. A lot of people speculate that was probably complications due to the 8th child. The mother and the 4 children preceded him to the great beyond. You know, the 1800s, early 1900s, the way they wrote is just beautiful. And then he married in 1859, had 8 more children, so he had a total of 16 children. But at the time of his death, he leaves to mourn their lost 5 children out of the 16. And then, you know, early life he was united with the church and was a firm believer in the Word of God. He died August 10th, 1911, age 88 years, 10 months, and 14 days. So that's a long time back then. And then our Father has answered the summons, how calmly and sweetly he rests. 'Twas Jesus who called him, and he passed to the realms of the blessed. And his wife was Mary Ann Wallace, and I have not found her parent. This is John III. This is Ambros Easton's parents. So he was born down in Boone County. Actually, was down there until 1870. I know that in 1873 they were in Missouri. They married in Missouri. His first child, Clarence Easton, was born in Missouri, and Ambrose Easton was born in Missouri. Then they show back, that was 1873, Ambrose 1874, so in 1880 he is actually back at Big Bone. They had 8 sons and 1 daughter. Both of them passed away in November 1927, just 13 hours apart, both of pneumonia. 4 of the 8 sons, 4 of them carried the mother's casket. You know, the aunts and uncles always told the story handed down. 4 carried the mother's casket, and the other 4 carried the father's. And they're buried in Independence Cemetery. And this is Ambrose Easton, so born October 19, 1874 in Missouri, 1880. He's with the family. He's 5 years old in Big Bone. 1900, Walton Verona District. He's 25 years old. He's listed on there. His father's listed as 1 farm number, and then he's listed as another farm number. And 1901, April 8th, Ambrose Easton married Linnie Frances Tanner. So this is all kind of just in the timeline. She was the daughter of Henry Lewis Tanner and wife Carrie Naomi Vaughn. So the parents, you can see how tall he was. What was it, Michael? He's 6'5" or something. I mean, very tall. And then Linnie's not in this picture. These are some of her siblings. So they had lived on a 102-acre farm located on Hopeful Lane. I often wondered how Grandma and Grandpa met. You know, he's in Walton Verona and she's on Hopeful Lane, but probably never know that. 1908. Ambrose Easton this was in the Boone County Reporter newspaper. I love reading microfilm for hints of not just my ancestors, but also neighbors or any families. You know, you see a lot of the same families back then. Has the sympathy of the entire community and was lost Saturday morning by fire. His barn containing about 2 stacks of hay, 35 barrels of corn, all his farming implements, 1 horse, 8 cows, and 2 calves was all burned. So he only had 1 horse at that time. He has no idea how it originated, lost $1,000. We know he's making rapid progress with his barn in the Devon News section, so he's still over in Independence. 1910, Ambrose Easton from Independence bought a horse for $175. 1910, he's living on Cody Pike in Kenton County. Him and the first three children, Tom, Nelma, Sally, and Kenneth Earl, which they call Johnny. And then 1912, February 8th, from the Boone County newspaper, James Russell Easton, infant son of Ambros and wife, who died of pneumonia. And he was 7 months, 2 weeks old, and the remains were brought to Hopeful and buried there. So now we jump all the way, let's slid off the bottom of the page there. Ambros and Linnie bought their 126-acre farm, and that's on February 25th, 1919, from John and Kate Miller for the deed that I found over at the Boone County Courthouse. And this is their farm with two of their grandchildren out front. It's Charles Ambros England and Jesse Ray England. For those of you that know, CA is what we always call him, Charlie and Jesse. And so 1920, living on, the census reports them living on Price Pike with all 7 children, Tom, Nelma, Sally, Kenneth Earl, Johnny, Lula Mae, Dooley, Jeanette's here, and Lindy Mildred was Aunt Millie Melton, and then my dad Arnold is 2 years old. So this is 1920. 1920, Ambrose joined Hope Lutheran Church per the record book over there by baptism on September 24th. And this is the picture of the barn. Easterdale Stock Farm, Ambros Easton owner, and their one son, Arnold Buck Easton, is shown here holding an old, what they called him Old Bob, a Percheron stallion, gray stallion there. You can see how tall he is, because Dad was about 5'9". This is 1923. This is at Ambrose's parents' Easton reunion. On the back of the picture, it had, thank goodness, September 1923, and it had Grandma and Grandpa's 50th wedding anniversary, which they were married in Missouri in 1873. So, and this is Keystone Pike. If anybody knows why that flag is hanging backwards, I'd love to know. I don't know if that was the camera or whether they wanted to see it the right way from inside the house, or. And this is just the same picture, only where I identified a few of the people. Sitting on the left, second, squatting there on the left, second from the left on the first row is Ambros Easton. And none of the spouses, this must have been, you had to be a pure Easton blood in there, because all 7 brothers, nobody's wives are in this picture. So I guess this was just an Easton picture. And then the same day was just the family picture. And there's Ambros Easton where their arrow's pointing there. And the children were Clarence, Ambrose, Volley, and Folly, who were twins, Charles, Mary, Abby was Abby Hayes. Clarence owned a home out on Idlewild Road, Clarence Easton. Everett, Eddie, and Eddie lived in a log cabin down Easton Lane in Burlington. And then Omer pretty much stayed over there in Kenton County. This is a summary sheet of the thoroughbreds known to be owned by Ambros Easton. I visited the Keeneland Library, and when you go down there, you can't just look up an owner and see all the horses he owns. You have to know the horses' names. So by the for sale handbill there that's framed of the thoroughbred horses right after Grandpa passed away, I had those 16 horses' names, plus from photos a few more. So entertaining names. You've got Noma F., which was named after Naomi Francis, one of his daughters. Arnold's actor, named after Dad. Busy Lena, I don't know if that was for Linnie or not. And then Ambrose E. in the year 1940. And this is the first photograph, January 12th, 1935. This is the fairgrounds track in New Orleans, Louisiana. Ambros Easton owner, and that is Grandpa holding the bridle there. When I first saw this picture, I thought that was Dad, because it's just remarkable how that looks like Dad. But according to the year, that's definitely Grandpa there. And this is the racing chart that I pulled. I pulled 249 racing charts, and I didn't even pull them all down at Keeneland for the horses for the race, because I thought it would provide a great timeline. I know Mom and Dad from living with Grandma and Grandpa said Grandpa was gone a lot racing, but I didn't realize how often and where all he went to. So it was very nice. And of course, when they're the winner, they will say the bred by Mr. A. Easton down there, trained by H.B. Reether. And then this is 2 months later, also at the Fairgrounds track in New Orleans, Louisiana. And this one is Dad holding it. So Dad was born in June 1917, so he's not quite 18 in this picture. The interesting thing about, we grew up with horses and everything, not thoroughbreds, but, horses to go get the milk cows and everything. But the interesting thing is, is how did they get to New Orleans and everything. They banned the horses from the farm on Price Pike down to Covington and rode trains, and they rode in the boxcars with the horses to these places. And then this is the race chart from that race. And this one is Latonia Racetrack, the old Latonia Racetrack, June 27th, 1936. Second place, Busy Ben, Mr. A. Easton second, is riding the horse. And it says Gentleman's Cup Purse. So I thought, well, what is a Gentleman's Cup Purse? I actually called James Claypool, and is the track historian and has wrote the books on the racetracks. And he said a Gentleman's Cup race is between riders who are not active as professionals. It can include amateurs, former riders, or anyone brave enough to give it a go. So it was a race they used to have that you didn't have to be a professional jockey. So that is Dad. I tried to zoom in on him. It looks like he's looking right at the camera. And then this is from the racing form from that picture. So you can see jockey Mr. A. Easton, owners A. Easton, which is, another confusion. A. Easton was Dad, A. Easton was Grandpa. You'll see over here is a tobacco hatchet, a hog killing knife, and a horse brush that have A.E. carved into them. And Dad did that, and Dad always said Pop had done that. I guess when the community got together to do whatever, they just had their initials A.E. carved into them. And this is a nice picture. It's a colored picture. This is Dade Park in Henderson, Kentucky. Sorry, that's cutting off the bottom of that. Ambros Easton, owner, and Arnold Ambrose Buck Easton was the trainer. So this is September 4th, 1936. And this is the racing form for that one. And I've got some, the racing forms over there in a binder if you're interested in looking at those. So now we're at October 28th, 1936. Here's Noma F, named after Aunt Nelma. Ambrose Easton owner. And this one actually cut off the bottom. Is there any way to pull that projector back, Pat?
I don't know how.
Okay. And
Does anyone in the audience know how?
well, that's okay. At the very bottom, and you can see it over here, it actually lists their names out. It says owner Ambrose Easton, trainer Arnold Easton. So this is October 1936. This is a close-up of the picture, and they look like gangsters in this picture to me. That's Jesse England, which is Charlie, Jesse Ray, and Betty's dad, Aunt Nelma's husband, and that's my dad, Buck Easton. So this is October 1936, and this is in River Downs. And there's the racing chart for that one. The summaries they give at the bottom of the race can be really entertaining. Down there at the bottom, it says, Noah sprinted into a good lead, was steadied along to the stretch, responded well when roused, and won with something left. Brown Ray under good urging throughout, finished strongly, lagged and tired. Yamiel had no mishaps. Princess A.O. made up ground, sneezed, tired, wore St. quit. So now we're at November 12, 1936 in Boone County Recorder, and there were several of these where they returned from trips in racing, but I just picked one of them. Ambrose Easton at Price Pike spent Saturday in Louisville, and his son Arnold accompanied him home after several weeks' stay attending the races. Because sometimes they'd be gone at a faraway track, a month and a half. Some of those meets ran 44 days. So after that, Dad only traveled to the local races with his father, Ambros, as all the other brothers and sisters had married and moved out. So they've still got the farm, they're farming, and they had Percheron horses and all the thoroughbred horses that weren't on the road, because a lot of times they'd only take on the road 2 or 3, and at one time I know they owned 14 horses, some with foal, etc. They were breeding. He then met and married Dorothy Morgan, and they continued to live at the Easterdale stock farm with Ambros and Linnie, and that's my mom. She'll be 89 in May, and that's Mom and Dad's wedding picture. That's in Reverend Hodder from Hopeful Lutheran's church in the parlor. And this is a picture I just borrowed off the courtesy of the Kenton County Public Library. If you've never been on there, their Faces and Places section on their website is wonderful. It'll even show digital pictures that were advertised in the Boone County Recorder. And you can even order the originals, which over there you can see there's some newspaper articles, and then where I ordered the original, and they're really a treasure if you all need any of those. May 10th, 1938, this is the first race, daily double at River Downs in Cincinnati. I guess in the early years that was always called Coney Island, and later it was called River Downs. This is Arnold's actor, A. Easton owner, H. Marlin trainer, S. Williams the jockey. And some of these back then, I think in the beginning they were only paying $300 to the net value to the winner. This one was $425. And this is a close-up of the bottom of that, so it's great to have, because it was locally, there were family members there, and that's Buck and Dot Easton on the left, Aunt Millie Melton, the jockey S. Williams, Grandpa Ambros, Grandma Linnie, and that's Aunt Dooley with her sons, Eddie and Jimmy Tanner. And this is borrowed again off of the website. This is July 4th, 1939 at the original Latonia racetrack in Latonia. So it was a big thing. And I think they raced there the next day. I looked at the racing charts that I pulled to see if they actually raced this day. Not that I was going to find them in that crowd or anything, but and this is a color postcard also off of the website of the Latonia racetrack, Old Latonia. And this is Dad holding a Percheron stallion, the same one that was in the other picture. And I was always told there was 3 barns, one barn for the thoroughbred horses, one barn for the draft horses, and one for the farming equipment. And so you can see how tall he is, because like I said, Dad was 5'9". And classify ads in the Boone County newspaper can be great. At the very bottom there, you see for sale 8 head draft horses and mares, 3 and 4 years old, all broke. Come and look these over before you buy. Ambros Easton, the Easterdale Stock Farm, and there's Florence and the 3-digit phone number that they used to have. And I like this one too, because at the very top there's Clyde Anderson, who was a neighbor down the road. One pair of 8-year-old workhorses, 1875-pound shoats, which are wheeling pigs, on Price Pike also. Buck Easton said that they showed their team horses at the Florence Fair, and often they would win best farm team. One year they had 4 teams in one class. He remembers them having 4 Percheron stallions and 1 Belgian stallion at one time. One year at the fair, a big rain came up, and they singled each of the farm horses and pulled cars out of the mud for $1 per car. Johnny said they made a lot of money that day. So Buck said that he, Pop, which is what he called his dad, and Johnny drove the farm teams. Bud Morris and Al Darby also drove some of their teams for them. And then Aunt Sally, Ambros's daughter, in a video said that Grandpa and Grandma had beautiful horses. That Florence Fair was a lot of fun, There was a grandstand in the center, bands playing, and they would walk around the promenade. I worked in the dining room there also. And this is Grandpa Ambros holding, I had to laugh when I saw this picture because we did this so many times, and I put a halter or anything on a horse, just jump on it, so there's no halter or bridle. And this is a young draft horse colt, And this is Eddie Tanner on the horse, and Charles Rothman to the left there. And that's the Easton home in the background. And this is Grandma and Grandpa. So it's 1940 now, and in November 1940, Grandpa was found in one of the stalls on the farm, unconscious, and his lung was collapsed, and it went into pneumonia and I think 10 days he passed away, November 20th, 1940. So, you know, Mom and Dad, Buck and Dot Easton, are still living with them, and it was a very big shock. He was 66 years old, and these are 3 of the obituaries that were in the paper. Mom said they actually laid him out right when you came in the door of the house. You know, she described it as like a big wicker basket type thing, is where they had the visitation in the house there before he was buried in Hopewell Cemetery. Also in the Boone County Recorder, this was in the Florence News section, and this was written by a friend after Grandpa died. I do not know who a friend was, but I laid it over there in case you're interested in reading it. Said he was a noble Christian and exemplary and consistent member of the Hopewell Lutheran Church. He possessed many sterling characteristics. He was always ready to help those in need and loved his neighbors. And right after Grandpa died, Mom and Dad always, you know, they said, you know, nobody could go with, you had the farm, you had the Percheron horses, large stock farm, among other animals. So the horses were sold right away. This is the actual handbills framed over there. And the exact date was unknown, but from the owners' names that I pulled on the race results charts down there, this was done sometime between Grandpa's passing on November 20th, 1940 and May 1941, because 3 of the horses listed on here had new owners and were in races in May. And that Busy Ben that they had wrote in that gentleman's cup purse from the old Latonia picture is on that list also. And actually there were 4 thoroughbred farms in Florence and Erlanger. The Easterdale Stock Farm, this is right out of the 1940 American Racing Manual of the breeding farms. There's a section for each state. So there was the Easterdale Stock Farm, 126 acres, and that's what it said, owned by Ambros Easton, 5 mares, stallion, and the stallion's name. I did not know that they had a grass training track. Highland Stock Farm was described as Erlanger. That was down 42, wasn't it, Michael? 25, I'm sorry, 25. And it says partly in Kenton County. And here they say owned by Mrs. Jerome Respis, because J.B. or Jerome Respis passed away July 25th, 1939 at the age of 75. And in the racing manual, it even had mentioned his death and said he was national known as a breeder and owner. He was the owner of the 1909 Kentucky Derby winner, Wintergreen. And then there was Hopewell Stock Farm, 125 acres owned by the H&S.P. Becker. And then Rockholm Farm, 40 acres owned by Gus Simone, I'm not sure the pronunciation of that. In addition to this, there was 4 or 5 tracks down in Walton and Verona areas. Farms, that's the tracks, farms. This is a summary for Busy Ben. You know, she was foaled in 1928, and actually, she was bred by J.B. Respis. Mom and Dad said that Mr. Respis and Ambrose were good friends, so I can picture them maybe traveling together to all those horse races. She was actually raced in 1930 and 31 under the ownership of I.B. Fitzgerald. Then it shows up as it being owned by Ambros Easton. Raced at those 10 tracks, states including Louisiana, Illinois, Kentucky, and Ohio. Her last race was October 24th, 1936. After her last race in 1936, she was a brood mare, still owned by Ambros Easton through 1940. And like I said, she's on the for sale handbill after his passing, so he had her right to the end. And not all the time things go very good. You know, I learned how to read some of these racing result charts, and when there's no index, a number in front of the horse's name there, that's their first race. And this was Arnold's Actor's first race, June 3rd, 1937 at Old Latonia. And you can see down there, Arnold's Actor unseated his rider, leaving the paddock, ran away for a quarter of a mile, and was never a factor. So I guess Grandpa probably wasn't too happy that day. That was his first race, but he did go on to do very well. So he was foaled in 34, that's the sire and the dam, and Grandpa had owned the mare. So I'm sure they raised him, broke him. He was in 78 races from June of 1937 through October 1940, while owned by Ambros Easton. That was his winnings, raced at these 10 tracks. And then he was sold, and he had new owners, of course, in 41 through 48 for 96 more races. So he did 174 races. Just to give you an idea of I just picked 1 year, one horse. Arnold's Actor raced here. You see Oakland Park in Hot Springs, Arkansas, March 24th, March 31st. So that's the first race in 1938. Then he's there for 5 races, won 2 out of the 5 at River Downs for their spring meeting. Then they're in Oxar Bend in Omaha, Nebraska. I thought he went to Omaha, Nebraska, because I'm sure that's a long way on a train. He raced there 4 races and won 3 out of the 4, so he did good. I guess it was worth it. And then Thistledown is up in Cleveland. He was up there racing July 16th through August 23rd. So a little over a month he's up in Cleveland. That's July. And then it's cut off September 9th through October 4th at Old Latonia. And then back at the fall meet at River Downs, October 13th through the 20th. And so just real quickly, this is 1932, 10 races, 4 tracks. And these are just of the horses. Like I said, you've got to have the horses' names. These are the ones that I could find. 1933 was 25 races, 3 tracks, all locally. Coney Island, which was renamed later to River Downs. 1934, pretty much all locally except New Orleans, Louisiana, and Dayton, Ohio. 1935, locally and in Cleveland. 2 places up by Cleveland, again at New Orleans. 1936, 1937, only 14 races. So 1935 is the most races, 56 races. 1938 is the trip out to Hot Springs, Arkansas, and also Omaha, Nebraska, only 19 races and 5 tracks. So you figure Grandpa's like 64 years old there, 38. And 1931. And 1940, 31 races, 5 tracks. So now it's 1942. This was in the Boone County Reporter that Arnold Easton advertised for breeding of this black Percheron stallion named Carmen. And by the horse, I'm guessing this is the same horse as the photos there. And I just threw this in. This is a great picture. It's on the farm, and this is my sister Janet and my first cousin Betty. It must be Easter. Easter bunnies on the Easterdale platform. And so it's 1943 now. Linnie is 66 years old. She bought a home at 8 Oblique Street. Richardson Plumbing's in that house now, I believe. And she wanted to move up to town next to her friend, Miss Hambrick. Easterdale stock farm had grown from 125 acres to 181 acres. In an adjoining 56 acres across the back was purchased from Amanda Tanner, who I think was the daughter of Harv and May Tanner. And so she bought that on December 22nd. So on January 27th of 1944, the 181-acre Ambros and Linnie farm was divided and sold to 2 of the sons. Buck and Dot Easton bought 81 acres. And they actually moved the Harv and May Tanner home from the back of their property up to the front of the property there on Price Pike, which is where they lived. It was 2 rooms upstairs, 2 rooms downstairs. And then Johnny and Eunice, Dad's brother, bought the 100 acres, including the home and the barns. So then March 1st, 1944, a public sale was held. And just the draft horses on this was one good team, sorrel horses 7 and 8 years old, will weigh 2,800, well broke, one team gray horses, well broke, 7-year-old Marion foal, 6-year-old horse, one black percher on stallion, registered 6 years old, one good gray percher on stallion, registered 11 years old. I'm guessing that's old Bob. Right. But the public sale, they even have buggies on there, planters, one horse-drawn, farming equipment. They actually cleaned this wagon up to sell it, and they decided to take a ride up to Bob and Jean's restaurant. So Bob Eads came out and took this picture. So Buck and Dot Easton are in the front, Ellen and Jess England, and Jim and Julie Tanner in the back there. So these are the 7 children of, it's kind of blurred, but this one I have of all of them. Buck, Johnny, Tom, Sally, Prather, Millie Melton, Nelma, England, and Julie Tanner. And I'm guessing this is early 1940s. That's Dad plowing one of the drag horses. And this is putting up a new silo at Buck and Dot's dairy farm. If anybody knows, I don't know the date of this, but if anybody knows trucks, maybe they can tell me what year truck that is. I don't know. Martin's brother Ralph's truck. And now it's 1958, and Grandma passed away. And, so that was 1958. On August 27th, 1959, the new Latonia racetrack opened up. The old Latonia had closed back right after the Depression. So this was on Price Pike, and how ironic that it was just across the street from where the Easterdale stock farm had been located. And it was renamed to Turfway Park in 1986. So this is just kind of I think this map might be late 60s, early 70s, but I just kind of inserted there where the Easterdale stock farm was. And so it was Price Pike and then down Zigzag that way. And this is Buck Easton. That was the dairy barn, the milk house store to the far right. And then December 74, January 75, after the airport first approached him about taking it for the airport, he opened up, we sold the dairy cows and opened up this Bi-County feed store branch. And this was their farm. This was a painting we had done for Dad, and they took the farm in October 79. This was a painting down there at Mom's that Mary Mandan did. We had taken photos, and took it. She did a beautiful job. So they lived, so Dad actually lived on the property 60 years. And this is after quail hunting. It was a wonderful place to grow up. I just want to say Price Pike community was just wonderful. That's actually the racetrack barns across the street there. We're standing about halfway between the house and the dairy barn. I was the bird dog too, so. And, there was nothing like a trip down to Thelma and Clyde Anderson's with their sheep. This was out of the Boone County Reporter, courtesy of the Kenton County Library. And actually, this was dated February 2nd, 1968. This is my dad on the far right. This was Bruce Ferguson, right there. And they had a meeting here at Charlie England's tack room about the airport's, selling of the airport extension. So yeah, that was February 2nd, 1968. So, the Damasco's, Turlough, Clyde Arnold, Van Elliott's Fishing Lake, the candy store, what a great place to grow up. And I'll leave you with this prayer of remembrance. It's just something really pretty, so I feel like I know them more, not just from gathering stories from Mom and Dad, but just kind of, because a lot of times you just don't remember where all they went, when they went, how often, and, but, put that together, genealogy research with stories from the family, you just feel really blessed. And that's it.
Oh.
Thank you again, Kathy. That was a marvelous presentation. Our next meeting will be on May the 20th. We'll be here again. And of course, starting earlier that day, as Joyce said, there will be a display of quilts. If you have a chance, go to Kentucky's History Day. It's this Saturday. And if not, we will see all of you hopefully back on May the 20th at our next meeting. Thank you for coming out tonight.